Well Online. My name is Chris, I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm so glad you're watching today. The Well is a church in Nashua, New Hampshire, whose mission is to help our friends and neighbors know and follow Jesus, create disciples who make disciples, impact our community through service, and start new churches all over New Hampshire. If you're watching for the first time, welcome. You belong with us. Go ahead and like our Facebook page and YouTube channel and subscribe if you've not already to stay in touch. And listen, don't just stay online. I invite you to join us in person every Sunday at 10 a.m. You know, we believe that to grow spiritually, we can't be a passive listener or watcher, so go ahead and click the link to fill out our digital connection card and be sure to take a next step. And you can also download the message notes for today or use our YouVersion notes to follow along with the message, and then share this video right now because you could impact someone's eternity. We invite you now to grab a pen, get comfy, sit back, and enjoy today's message.
Pastor Scott here, and I'm really excited that you decided to join us in our live stream only Sunday. And if you're watching online but you've never joined us in person, come next week as we continue in our series, Take Back Your Life. But I got a question for you as we progress in the next phase of this series. How do people experience you? Now, I ask the question because often we want to be experienced in a particular way, life-giving, peaceful, hopeful, happy, whatever you want to be experienced, but we can sometimes come across in ways that we just don't mean at all. Now, this is for the parents who are watching right now. Anybody else feel like bedtimes can just be a monster? You love your kids, but when it comes time to bedtime, like things fall apart. You're trying to get your kids down for the night, and you know that sleep is good for them, and so you're going to do whatever you can to try to get them to sleep, and yet it's like they're going to find any excuse they possibly can to get out of the room. Now, when they do that, right, they'll come up with the excuses, I need some water, I'm thirsty, or it's too hot in here, or I got to go to the bathroom, and we're like, you just went to the bathroom, right? If you're not careful as a parent, the moment that you want to be tender and loving can turn into a monster, right? I'm not gonna lie. I've had some moments that were a little less than my best when trying to discipline the kids and give them boundaries so they can actually sleep what's good for them, right? I mean, like, I'm gonna steal your teddy bear for the night and take it away. I'm like, I'm gonna rip off your pillow and you're gonna sleep in nothing tonight. And they're like, no! Just kidding. But it does get bad sometimes, and I have to ask the question, how do I actually want to be experienced? So, unique season for us right now. Because my family actually, as you're watching this, is currently in the middle of a move. We're moving from one house to the next, and that's vulnerable for kids. Over the past couple weeks, as we've had boxes all over the house, it's just been a little bit vulnerable, and our kids have needed more of our tenderness than less. And so we're exhausted one night. We're just watching a show to unwind, and sure enough, we hear the door to our girls' room open. It kind of creaks open, and we're like, oh, here it is again. And then the slow pit-pat on the top of the stairs, and, Daddy, I'm scared. And everything inside of us at this moment just wants to go back to bed. Every parent understands this, right? But there was something on the inside of me in that moment where I just felt like the God of the universe supernaturally gave me what I didn't have on the inside. And he just reminded me, this is a tender moment. Your kids need you to be tender in it. So I walked up the stairs instead of my normal, go back to bed, and I just put an arm around my girl. And as I just sat there and put an arm around her, I could feel her body breathe a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And I said, hey, what's wrong? And she goes, there were some shadows on the wall. And I'm like, yeah, the wall that used to have the dresser that we got rid of because we're moving. And she goes, yeah. I said, do you really think that's kind of scary monsters or maybe just the dresser not being there? And she goes, it's probably just the dresser. I'm like, it's going to be okay, right? And she goes, yeah, okay. And then she walked back to bed after another hug. And I'm telling you, what God whispered to me in that moment is, Scott, how do you want your kids to remember you? when they're no longer in the house and they're grown and they're gone, because at some point they're going to remember how they felt in the home, and they're going to turn to you or they're going to turn from you. And it's how you deal with these tender moments, how they experience you in these tender moments that are going to make or break that. And that's why we ask the question, how are you experienced these days? Now, what's wild about this is, as I was reflecting on this more, is my girl was in a tender season as we're moving. Our world has been through global trauma over the past 2 years, and so many of us have been a bit frayed at the edges, right? And let's be honest, our world has responded in a little less than tenderness. Most of the time, when we think about the problems that are existing in the world and frayed at the edges, it is less than gentle. It's harsh, it's opinionated, it's, beating people with what we believe is right and true. And in all the wrong ways, we're responding in just knowledge and information instead of real love and tenderness. And the big question for us today is, what's God inviting us into? How are we supposed to respond in moments when things can get a bit tense and a little frayed at the edges? Well, as we progress in our series, Take Back Your Life, we're inviting the Spirit of God to do inside of us what we are not naturally prone to do. And we've looked at the spirit of love and joy and peace, patience, kindness, all that. Today, what we're going to look at is gentleness. And I don't know a fruit of the Spirit that is maybe more unnatural and yet maybe more needed in our world today than gentleness. In our frayed at the edges world, we need gentleness maybe now more than ever. Now, if you're like me, when you hear the word gentleness, you can think it's kind of like a non-important thing, right? I mein, it's who wants, like, if you're really going to make a difference in this world, would you want the description about your life to be, oh, he was gentle, right? In a lot of ways, it's like, well, he was kind of like non-consequential, like he wasn't significant. If someone's described as gentle, like I've even heard phrases of people that were like, they changed the world, but nobody changes the world if they're meek, right? But here's the wild thing. Jesus calls us in Ephesians 4:2. He says this about his followers. He says, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. And in Titus 3:2, he says, slander no one, be peaceable and considerate, and always, always be gentle toward everyone. This is a huge part of what it means to follow Jesus. And Jesus described himself as someone who is lowly and gentle in heart. Now, if you're like me, you're tempted to think, man, like if Jesus was constantly gentle and just always like putting an arm around someone and talking nice and tender and all that, like did he ever get anything done? Do gentle people ever win at anything? We're going to take a look at this today because contrary to what we might think, people who are gentle are far from pushovers. They're some of the most powerful people on the planet. Here's a definition of gentleness. Gentleness is a humble and approachable posture of dealing with people in kindness and tenderness for their sake. Here's the first thing I want you to write down when we think about becoming gentle people. To be gentle, expose problems, but win people. Expose problems, but win people. Galatians 6:1 says, brothers and sisters, if someone's caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. Now, underline the word restore, right? Gentleness is not just being a doormat and letting people walk all over you, meek and mild and like, having nothing important to say. No. It fights for restoration, but it does it in a completely different manner than how the world tends to operate. You see, there's something on the inside of us that naturally gravitates towards law and force and loud voices when we want to fix problems. Samuel James puts it this way. He says that the sense that fear and law are what really motivate obedience and that grace and forgiveness lower the stakes is programmed into our self-righteous consciences every bit as much as licentiousness. Meaning, if we think we're going to fix a problem, we better get loud about it and opinionated about it and throw the truth out there and just hammer people with the law. But is that really what's going to win things at the end of the day? Expose problems, but win people. That's what gentleness does. Some of you grew up in families where your parents were really good at laying down the law. Maybe some of you even grew up in churches where like laying down the law and truth was so clear, but it was without a whole lot of love and grace. Now, just a question for you in that. If you grew up in those environments that lacked grace and tenderness and gentleness and was heavy on law, does it leave you wanting more or less? Does it leave you turning toward those parents, toward that church, towards that environment, or away from it? You see, law without grace always alienates in the end. But this is the power of gentleness. Watch this. Proverbs 15:1 says it this way: a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. A gentle answer, it turns away wrath. There's power in being gentle. Sure, exposing the problem, but doing it in a way that wins people. Sometimes we can be so focused on the problem that we miss the people that this problem is all about in the first place. And Jesus is always calling us in his relational mission, win the people. Win the people. In our fight sometimes for getting things right, we can completely miss the people in the process. Ironically, Friedrich Nietzsche, who was not a Christian theologian by any stretch of the imagination, he put it this way, and I loved how he said it. He said, in your efforts to defeat the monster, make sure you don't become the monster. You know how good that is? In your fight to get what's right, sometimes you can miss the people, and the very thing that you're fighting is something you become. So I've shared this story with you guys before, but I'm a pretty positive person, consider myself an optimist, but I can turn that into an optimist monster sometimes. I'll never forget the Sunday that I showed up and in our tech booth was struggling with all sorts of tech issues, and they were just really frustrated. 2 hours of trying to problem solve this thing and nothing was working. I show up 2 hours in and they're like, man, we're having all sorts of tech issues. And I said, hey guys, we don't even need that stuff. I can just preach the word. We don't need mics or sound or nothing. We don't even need that. And you know what they heard? We don't need you. I completely dismissed everything that they were working so hard for with the right hearts, and I dismissed them in the process. And in trying to get the problem right, I missed the people. May expose the problem, but win people. That's what gentleness does. 1 Corinthians 4:21 puts it this way: what do you prefer? Shall I come to you with a rod of discipline, or shall I come in love and a gentle spirit? Some of you, maybe your go-to is just to be blunt, to be harsh, to be in your face. And this is a word for you. People will lean into you not because your truth was right, but because your posture was gentle. What kind of a boss do you want to be? What kind of a friend do you want to be? What kind of parent do you want to be? How are people experiencing you? I got a friend who worked under a boss one time who got a lot of things done, but the posture with which he led was pretty harsh. My friend describes a moment where he walked into his workplace and into a meeting that was led by his boss, and his boss said, hey, do you get those papers ready? And he said, oh, you know what, man, I forgot. And the boss said, okay, we're going to wait here until you get it ready because you're wasting everybody's time. And he turned back and he grabbed the papers and he came back into the meeting, but you know what? Everyone in that meeting was lost. Sure, was it wrong for someone to not come in prepared? Yeah. And should they have exposed the problem? Sure. But you lost people in the process. And you know what? That company has a high level of turnover year after year after year because the harsh leadership has lost the very people they're trying to reach. How do people experience you? And do they tend to turn away from you or turn towards you? Everything's going to hinge on your gentleness. Here's the second thing I want you to write down. To be gentle, you got to replace short-term gains for long-term change. Short-term gains for long-haul change. And here's what I mean by this. Some of us, when we think about fixing the problem, we will raise our voice, we'll force an issue, and we do this in parenting sometimes, right? If your kids aren't listening and they're screaming and they're out of line and the discipline issues are happening over and over in the day, you are tempted to just think, man, my kids aren't listening to me. They're not hearing me, and they're not obeying. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get louder, and I'm going to get more intense, and my voice is going to get sharper, and maybe they'll listen to me in that moment. Right? How many parents, come on, throw up the white flag if you've ever done that. That's our tempted go-to. But I'm telling you, in that moment when you get loud and intense and harsh, you might win the short-term battle, Your kids actually might follow through in that moment because you got intense, but you know what? You're going to lose the war in the long run. Because it's not a loud force that's going to win over the hearts of your kid. It's a posture of gentleness. Proverbs 25:15 puts it this way: through patience, a ruler can be persuaded. A gentle tongue can break a bone. Gentle tongue. Man, we think sometimes, I'm not being heard. I can't be gentle because I'm not listening. It's not effective enough, and so I'm just going to raise my voice. But what he's saying here is that a gentle tongue is actually, in the long run, far more powerful than just raising your voice. You might win the short-term battle, but you're going to lose the long-haul war. Captain Newman, who's a doctor, once put it this way: I learned that it is the weak who are cruel, and that gentleness is to be expected only from the strong. I loved that. But man, it's easy for us to just think, man, I've got to be intense, forceful, in your face if I'm going to get anything done in this world, and if anybody's going to hear me. But Scripture puts it the opposite way and says, no, we've got to enter it with a completely different posture if we want to see real things happen. Anybody? Let me just ask you this: anybody watch Mr. Rogers growing up? If you have, you understand the power of gentleness. This guy was a radical when it came to gentleness. He was a staple in the homes of so many, hundreds and thousands of Americans for a long time. And some of us, we might think, well, why are you talking about Mr. Rogers? He's a bit dated. But he's made a bit of a resurgence, hasn't he? There was a major documentary that came out just a couple years ago called Won't You Be My Neighbor? And Tom Hanks starred in a film that recaptured the essence of Mr. Rogers back in 2019. And I had to ask myself the question, why is he making a resurgence right now? And I think it's because gentleness is so lacking in our world currently. And he was a master at it. Now, why in the world did he have such an impact? Watch this. Fred Rogers was a bit of an anomaly. He was wiry, he was nerdy, he was soft-spoken, really gentle man, and he ran this really low-budget kids program. When you think about TV stars, you don't think Fred Rogers. You think of people who are eccentric, they've got, charisma about them. You watch Mr. Rogers, and the dude was a snore. He's pretty boring if you look at him from first glance, and yet he had a huge impact. Why? Well, you have to know this about the man. First, he was a committed Christian and actually an ordained Presbyterian minister. He loved Jesus, and he was so fierce in his commitment to go places for kids that very few were going in. He addressed real issues that kids were facing, that their parents weren't raising them in, weren't teaching and training them in. Issues like how to handle divorce, how to handle illnesses and sickness, how to go through war, what do you do with bullying? He went there, but the reason he won kids' hearts was not because he was entertaining, not because he was forceful or he was opinionated. He was gentle. And every kid leaned in when they watched Mr. Rogers. There was one guy who put it this way. He said, Fred Rogers helped raise me. I didn't have what you call a stable family or origin situation. And one of my anchors on almost a daily basis was to get to sit down and listen to Fred Rogers say through his TV screen, I like you. And please, won't you be my neighbor? He says he brought me comfort. He brought me a sense of love, a sense of protection, a sense of safety, even through the TV screen. Very different than what current contemporary culture offers us. Contemporary current culture offers us tribes. It offers us outrage, offers us partisanship, offers us versus them, offers us many, many, many dynamics between human communities that have not been led to unity and peace. But in vivid contrast stood Fred Rogers, of all people, in a posture of gentleness. And he won people's hearts. Now, I came to find this about Fred. He actually was bullied as a kid because of his weight issues. And this is what he said about it. I will never, under any circumstance, as long and as far as it depends on me, allow a child to be made to feel like I was made to feel if I can help it. I want every child to know they are loved and capable of loving. Perhaps our Lord and Savior would have said the same thing when he said, let the children come to me. Gentleness is powerful. In 1 Kings 19:12, actually, there was a moment where the prophet Elijah was faced with God, and he had a powerful moment with God, but it wasn't in the earthquake that was in front of him. It wasn't in the fire. It wasn't in the wind. It was at the very end through a gentle whisper. When God showed up to him in gentleness, it undid him. As Ralph W. Sockman put it, he says, nothing is so strong as gentleness. Nothing is so gentle as real strength. You want to have lasting impact on people's lives? Approach them with gentleness. And so here's 3 things that I want to train you in when it comes to developing a posture of gentleness. Watch this. If you want to become gentle, number 1, change your pace. Change your pace. Jesus was never hurried. And when he calls himself gentle and lowly, one of the things that he was amazing at in developing gentleness was that he was never hurried. In fact, he was slow. And if you think about it, our world and the pace that we live in is so fast and so hurried that it's difficult to be gentle. I mean, how many of you, when you're driving on the highway, you see that guy in the slow lane that's just driving at like 50 miles an hour in a 65 zone that you know everyone's going 75 anyway. Like, you look at him and the last thing you think of is being gentle towards the guy, right? And God forbid he jump into the fast lane, right? In that moment when you are hurried and rushed, like the last thing on your mind is being gentle towards anybody. Any parent ever try to get their kids in the car when they're rushed? How gentle are you in that moment? Stop your crying. Shut up. Get in the car. Look, it's really hard to be gentle when you're rushed and preoccupied. And gentleness adopts a speed that's a lot of theologians call the speed of love. It's slow. It's not hurried. And so I encourage you, if you want to be gentle, slow down. Take a deep breath and watch God work. Number 2, change your tone. So change your pace, change your tone. Some of you, you got a tone, and it's a natural tone, and it's not exactly a peaceful, gentle tone. And some people have told you, man, you need to change your tone, which always helps, right? When people are like, hey, you got to change your tone. You're like, what's wrong with my tone? Right? Problem is, we can say something that's totally right. Factual, truthful, spot on. But the way you say it can alienate people or win people. Man, I just can't help but think that when Jesus was around, walking around people, discipling people, winning people to his cause, there was a quality of the tone of his life that spoke love. It wasn't just truth, it was truth and grace. There was a quality to his tone that said, man, I'm for you, I'm with you. We can do this together. Watch your tone. 3rd thing is change your posture. Change your pace, change your tone, change your posture. I had a friend the other day who was telling me that he had some discipline issues with his kid, and he was setting boundaries and disciplining him, setting all sorts of timeouts. They were doing all sorts of things all throughout the day, and just nothing seemed to be working. And then he had this little epiphany, and he just got down on his knees and it got eye level with his kid. And they had a conversation at eye level. When he got all the way down on the floor and looked at his kid in the eye, his kid softened. And he knew, man, Dad was with me in that moment. What's your posture like? Are you running so fast that you don't see the people around you? Is your tone sharp and edgy and harsh? And do you actually get down at eye level with the people who are around you? Or are you constantly going all over the place and trying to level one up over someone else? Max Lucado put it this way. He says, I choose gentleness. Nothing is won by force. I choose to be gentle. If I raise my voice, may it only be in praise. If I clench my fist, may it only be in prayer. And if I make a demand, may it only be of myself. Guys, this is the posture with which the God of the universe approached us. And here's the 3rd thing that I want you to write down in your notes. To be gentle, remember that God is gentle with you and with me. He's gentle with us. In fact, when Jesus came in as a king, he didn't come in pomp and circumstance and with force and with a loud voice. How did he come? In Matthew 21:5, it says, "Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, but gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." Horses, prestigious, kingly, masterful. Donkeys, little embarrassing, right? Let's be honest about that. This is how the God of the universe came to you and me. He didn't come with pomp and circumstance and force and in your face and harsh. He came gentle, riding on a donkey. This is the whole posture that Jesus shows us as he works with people all the time. We look in Luke 15 when he describes this story of a prodigal son who left home and wasted his father's wealth. When the son came back, the dad wasn't harsh with him and said, "Yeah, I can't believe that you did that. You took all my money, you wasted it, you've ruined us and you've ruined me. Get out of here, I never want to see you again." How did the father respond? The father, in a humbling, almost embarrassing way, took the hem of his robe and tucked it into his belt and ran after the son, threw his arms around him and wept with joy. "My son was lost and he's back. He's back." There was a gentleness, and even before the son could come up with his sob story speech of, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, the dad said, "Go kill the fattened calf. My son is home." And he looked him in the eyes. His pace changed as he surrounded him with love. There was a moment where the religious elite brought a woman who was caught in adultery and threw her at Jesus' feet in John 8. And in that moment, the religious elite wanted to test Jesus, and they looked at him and said, "Man, what should be done with this woman? Because she was caught in adultery." And Jesus, so tellingly, slowly is just drawing something that we'll never know what he was drawing in the sand. He wasn't hurried. He wasn't intense. And as they're intense and trying to figure out how to right this problem, she's so wrong, Jesus slowly gets up and with a tone of gentleness looks at the men and said, "He who's without sin, be the first one to cast a stone." And quietly, they all left one at a time. Why? Because it cut them right at the heart. Jesus didn't lash out at them with force and violent sounds. He cut them with gentleness, and then he looked at the woman and he said, "Woman, where are your accusers?" And when she said they're gone, he said, "Get up, go in peace, and sin no more." The God of the universe has a posture of gentleness towards you. And ultimately, he demonstrated that to us and for us when he put himself on the cross, forever eliminating our punishment and guilt and shame. I mean, if there was ever a moment where someone would rightfully say, "You are in the wrong and you deserve punishment and harsh punishment," it was God extending that to us, but he chose not to. Because instead of just focusing on the problem, God came to win people. And he did it through gentleness, even at his own expense. The other day, I had a moment with my son, who also was having some behavior issues, and we were going at it all day. Like, he was screaming and not obeying and pulling hair and not treating his mom well, and it was timeout after timeout after timeout, and quite honestly, I was just exhausted after it. And I just had a moment where I was like, man, I'm fed up. I don't even know what to do. And so after punishing him and trying to coach him through it one more time, I just laid down on my bed and just was quiet there for a while, exhausted. And I hear the slow pit-patter of my little boy's feet. He's got his bear lovey in one hand and his thumb sucking in the other hand. And he climbs up onto my bed and he just nuzzles right into me. And just the two of us are there just snuggling. And after a long day that just felt really difficult, we just sat there for a long time in the quiet. And after a while, he looked up at me and he just had these eyes of, "Daddy, am I still good with you?" And I looked at him and I said, "Caleb, this is my favorite moment of the whole day. I love you, buddy." That's God's heart for you. He's gentle, and he wants you close. My question for you is, who needs your gentleness right now? Who in your workplace? Who in your family? Maybe your marriage? Maybe you need to own up to the fact that you've been less than gentle, you've been harsh and unkind. I encourage you this week, change your pace, change your tone, change your posture, and remember what God did for you and extend that to others in an air of gentleness. And I guarantee you, God will use you to change the world. In just a moment, I'm going to throw up some discussion questions for you and anybody in your group that's watching right now for you to reflect on. But I just invite you in this moment, pray with me, and we'll close out. Holy God, we need your help in this. We live in a world that is so conditioned to be harsh and opinionated and factual and just want to get so much stuff done and successful and achievement driven that we've lost sight of how powerful gentleness is. Bring us back, God. My prayer right now is that the people, my friends who are watching on the other side of this screen, is that they'd have a moment like my son had with me the other day, where we can enjoy the gentleness of God and remember you're for us, you're with us. And Lord, I pray that it would change our hearts in the process and enable us to become the kind of people who extend that gentleness to a world that's desperate for it. In Jesus' name, amen. So glad you joined us today. Next week, we're going to finish our series, Take Back Your Life. We're going to talk about self-control. But until then, enjoy these discussion questions. Talk it out with people around you. Have an awesome Sunday. We'll see you next week.
We are so glad you joined us today. Make sure you fill out that connection card and take a next step, or let us know how we can pray for you. You know, if you decided to follow Jesus today for the first time or would like more information about it, check that box on your connection card, because we would love to provide some resources for you and answer any questions you might have. It might be the most important decision that you ever make in your life. Now, we encourage you to give generously by clicking the link or texting the $ in the amount to 84321, because your giving will allow us to do even more to help our friends and neighbors know and follow Jesus. I hope you had a great experience with us today online, but hey, don't just stay online. Join us in person on Sundays at 10 a.m. See you next Sunday.